So good morning, everyone, and thank you to our November webinar series. Today we are doing important updates on the TSIA2. So today we're going to take a deeper dive into TSIA2 information that you'll need to help your students achieve college readiness standards as they prepare for graduation and beyond. We've got experts from the coordinating board on the TSIA2 for an overview and need to know updates on the assessment, training, academic intervention you can offer to your students and see what is successful on campuses and experts here that are joining us today that are going to share some best practices with you. We are recording this webinar. And just to give you a reminder with Texas OnCourse, all students, no matter where they come from or where they're headed, have a plan for success after high school. We will post our webinar and send it to you in email, and we are recording, but don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which the link is right there at the bottom. That way you can search by content and topic. We can see all of our updates, and our monthly webinar series pops onto that YouTube channel. A couple of things that quite a few people usually ask about our webinars. We are, of course, recording. We mentioned the YouTube channel that we post those recordings at. The recording is sent out to everyone that has registered. Frequently, we know folks have scheduling conflicts. So if you are not able to join live, you will still receive that recording via email. We also post those to our website, and that link is listed down there. We also have a webinar tab from our homepage where we talk about upcoming webinars. These are on Tuesday at 10 a.m. and they are monthly, and we post all of the recordings and the descriptions to our webpage. So this morning's agenda, we have a lot of great information. We're just going to talk about who's joining the webinar this morning to talk about TSIA2. And then Sam Kimmel from the Texas OnCourse Content and Resources team is our high school program coordinator, and she's going to talk a little bit about the resources that we have at Texas OnCourse that cover TSIA and TSIA2. And then Kelan Morgan, our Assistant Director of College Readiness at the Coordinating Board, is going to talk about all of those updates that you all are looking for. Lots of great information. And then we have Michelle Snyder, College and Career Advisor from Crockett Early College High School and Austin ISD, talk a little bit about how the testing works at their campus, things that they're looking to improve upon, and just what that looks like in a K-12 high school setting. And then we'll save some time also for Q&A toward the end. My name's Laura Guggen, and I'm Director of Program Implementation at Texas OnCourse. Our team works directly with school districts that are using our resources, and our goal is to identify student and educator outcomes from using Texas OnCourse as part of the coordinating board. Sam?
Hi, everyone. As Laura mentioned, my name is Sam Kimmel, and I work on Texas OnCourse's content and resources team. And so I help develop and maintain content in all of our great tools like the Texas OnCourse Academy and the new financial aid graduation requirement website. So excited to be part of the conversation today.
Kelan?
Good morning. I'm Kelan Morgan, Assistant Director for College Readiness at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, particularly specializing in all things Texas Success Initiative and developmental education, among other things. And it's great to be with you this morning.
Thank you so much. And Michelle?
Hi, good morning. My name is Michelle Snyder. I'm the College and Career Counselor at Crockett Early College High School and Austin ISD, and I'm also the TSI Site Administrator on my campus, so I coordinate all things TSI on my campus.
Wonderful. We are so happy to have everyone join us this morning. Just really quickly before we dive into all this information, we would love to know in the chat, what is one question you have this morning about the TSIA2? I'm sure you have lots of questions, but if you want to go ahead and take a minute and think about something you'd like to learn this morning, chances are we will probably cover it, but we would love to see kind of what people are curious about. Erica from Hutto said how best to prepare students for TSIA. Thank you, Erica. Can our teachers take it? How writing is scored. I see lots of information about preparation, lots of prep questions. Great. Is the essay still required? Setting up test day. Multiple measures and expiration dates. Helping students who fail and want to retest, absolutely. Prepping students and families for conversations, accommodations. Becoming a test site. Wonderful. Feel free to continue to put those in there. We're going to go ahead and dive into our information. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam Kimmel for our resource spotlight.
Alrighty, thanks, Laura. So just want to briefly hop on here this morning to talk about one of Texas OnCourse's tools that can support everybody on this call in working with students on the TSI and just understanding college readiness. And that is going to be our Texas OnCourse Academy. And so for those of you on the webinar who are new to the Texas OnCourse Academy, this is an online professional development learning resource on various college and career advising topics. It is completely free for all Texas educators and can help you prepare any student for whatever post-secondary option they are pursuing. To get to this through our website, you're going to need to navigate from the educator's drop-down menu at the top of the home screen. There's going to be an option there to access the Academy. And from that page, you can actually register or log into an existing account if you already have one. So definitely encourage you to sign up today if you haven't already. One of the modules that can actually support college readiness discussions and just working with the TSIA with your students is the Advising All Students to Be College Ready module. And so if you tuned in last month to our October webinar, we briefly highlighted this module here, but these are the learning objectives for the module, so you can see that it's going to provide a thorough overview of what exactly it means to be college ready at both the K through 12 and post-secondary levels, and also give you the means to have conversations with students in language that they actually understand, so they understand the implications of meeting or not meeting college readiness and how that's going to maybe impact their post-secondary trajectory. And of course, in all of that, it brings in discussions of the TSIA too, as well as just the statute itself. So you will definitely want to check that out to get all the information you need on this topic. And if we go to the next screen here, one unit in particular that you will definitely want to review is Unit 2, where we cover actually the TSI and TSIA2. And this is going to help you understand what qualifying scores are needed to exempt out of the assessment, and also, of course, an overview of the actual scores on the TSIA2 that are needed to demonstrate college readiness through that test. And you'll also find some resources and strategies to support your students in actually preparing for the exam and, retesting options. All of that good stuff we know that our students need. And lastly, I just want to also touch on one other resource that you may find useful. Here we have a quick chart to compare accommodations for both the TSIA2 and the SAT. So this is, something that you can bookmark and keep on hand, just to keep in mind what different accommodations are actually offered through each assessment, as well as what the request process is, since it looks a bit different depending on whether a student is taking the TSIA2 or the SAT, at least in that K through 12 setting. And if we haven't dropped a link here, I will definitely make sure to do that. So I will check the chat right after I hop off here, but this is the module in Canvas. So there's several ways to actually navigate to it once you are in the online academy. But one way is from your actual dashboard menu, you will see the option for post-secondary pathways, foundational knowledge. That is going to open up that course. And from there, you can click View Module to actually see the module outline and start hopping around to the different content areas that are relevant to you. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and drop that link if it didn't make it in there, but otherwise I will go ahead and turn it over to Kelan Morgan to dive deep into the TSIA updates.
Good morning, everyone. And excuse my voice in advance. I'm battling these wonderful Texas climate issues, so my allergies are definitely flaring. So I'll do my best to keep a clear voice. Next slide. The agenda for the day, jam-packed. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you in a little bit of time. However, this presentation will be provided to you, and definitely you're able to follow up with me with any questions that you may have. Next slide. So we always like to start with the foundation, and that is the baseline. What is college readiness? This obscure, sometimes convoluted term that we use very loose in both the K-12 space and higher education space. But particularly when we're referring to college readiness in higher education, we're referring to the Texas Success Initiative, which is a statute that applies to all public institutions of higher education, and it requires two things. One of which is very prevalent, which is the assessment, currently the Texas Success Initiative assessment version 2.0. However, the assessment requires that students be assessed for college readiness to enroll in freshman level academic coursework. However, there's a second component to the statute, which requires institutions to advise and develop an individualized plan for academic success for students that do not meet the benchmark and are therefore deemed underprepared. That simply means that the institution has to definitively tell the student what course of action, whether it be coursework through developmental education, or what type of intervention the student needs to engage in to become college ready. And as a reminder, institutions may not use the TSI as a condition of admission for the institution or to a specific program of study on their campus. Next slide. In an overview, here's what the data looks like regarding students entering college in fall 2019. And in advance, you might wonder, okay, why are they still presenting fall 2019 data? The way that our data is certified is a pretty long process, unfortunately. However, this is the most recent data that we have available at this time. Statewide, you'll see that just under 40% of students are coming through the doors of higher education not college ready, and roughly 57% are coming in college ready. However, when it breaks out to the 2-year and 4-year institutions, it looks vastly different, and it's easily explained. 2-year colleges have the heavy brunt in this work, working with our underprepared students, where almost 60% of their students come in the doors underprepared, juxtaposed 4-year institutions where just about 15% are coming through the doors underprepared. And that's explained due to the fact that our 4-year institutions have more stringent admission criteria than the majority of our community colleges, which are open enrollment. Next slide. This slide gives you kind of like a longitudinal look at how students enter college ready by subject area. And I know the first question that you have is, I still see reading, writing, and math, but the TSIA2 combined reading and writing to English language arts and reading. However, for reporting purposes, just so we can keep that longitudinal perspective, it will always be reported from institutions to the coordinating board in 3 subject areas. So you'll see that overall, that goal line at the bottom, that 57% are entering the doors in 2019, college ready, and then leading up, math at its lowest, 61%, And then right there in the middle, we have reading at 76% and then 87% with writing. And that just shows that while we're making some progress and we're seeing some leveling off and even a slight decline in some areas, that we still have some work to do. However, some of the work that we're specifically doing in the realm of developmental education reform, we're very, very hopeful, and it's showing very promising results to impact these numbers in the very near future. Next slide. Regarding TSI updates, and these are updates to the statute. So Rule 4.54, as of April 22nd, 2021, the board has approved for use GED and HiSET scores to be used as college readiness indicators, meaning that if students present GED or HiSET scores in the manner that's presented on this slide, and these are the benchmarks that are currently set forth by the test vendor. However, we are collecting data to do an analysis to ascertain whether or not the benchmark that they have set is actually comparable to the TSI benchmarks. So for GED, if a student makes a 165 on the mathematical reasoning or the 165 on the RLA, that student can be considered college ready. And with the HiSET, those scores are there as well, with one caveat. So on August 31st, the HiSET, effective August 31st, 2021, the HiSET is no longer offered in the state of Texas as an approved high school equivalency exam. So therefore, only scores on or before August 31st can be used for the TSI exemption. So if a student presents HiSET scores to an institution that are on or before August 31st, 2021, that student will indeed, if they meet those benchmarks, will be considered college ready. And it stands until rule is updated for the GED. Next slide. If we have any higher education partners in the audience, our developmental education program survey, and this is where we assess the landscape of what's happening in developmental education across the state. It launched on October 4th, and we are nearing that submission date of November 12th. And it has two components, no major changes from last year. And the unique thing about this particular survey is it always has 100% response rate from our institutions because it is required in the TSI statute. Another note, beginning in fall 2021, this current semester, institutions must scale co-requisite enrollments to 100% for students at diagnostic level 5 for math and levels 5, 6 for ELAR. However, while the TSI COVID waiver is in place, institutions have a great latitude to place both dual credit and high school complete students, but this particular bullet regarding the 100% co-requisite enrollment for those certain students only applies to high school complete students. Institutions may use the COVID waiver options for placements through summer 2022. Fall 22 placements must revert to THECB rules, and they're there for your reference. Now, before you start emailing me, this is not an indictment that we do not support multiple measures assessment. Indeed, it's just the opposite. One thing that we noticed with the launch of the TSI COVID waiver is institutions are using everything in the kitchen sink. So how we like to look at what we're doing now is we're really dialing this back to where we'll just be working with a small subset of institutions that will continue to use multiple measures assessment in the context of the TSI COVID waiver, so we can gather rich data and analyze it in the with the purpose of analyzing this data to inform future statewide policy. And so that's, again, to develop in an effort to develop a multiple measures assessment policy that's statewide and not so much as it is now, where it's it could be very different from institution to institution. Next slide. Next slide. And just to recap on what I shared regarding the TSI COVID waiver, it allows institutions to use indicators other than those currently approved in rule for placement of students into standalone TSI liable college level courses without required DE support. And without required DE support is the most important component of this, for the simple fact, and I'll share in a few slides later, that actually holistic advising is already available to institutions. It just only allows them to place the student within the spectrum of developmental education, co-requisite courses, or interventions that they feel the student needs. Just a note, the use of the COVID waiver does not allow authority to modify existing rule. For existence, the 530 SAT exemption for math, it cannot be made conjunctive with a high school GPA or an Algebra 2 course grade. However, under the TSI COVID waiver, if an institution wanted to perhaps use a PSAT score or a course taken pattern or high school GPA or a combination of those factors, they can do that. However, any indicator that's already outlined in rule with a benchmark cannot be modified. And last, the COVID waiver is not an indicator of college readiness. It's simply a mechanism in which institutions can use to place students in college level courses without required support. And as you're aware, the successful completion of the college level course would be the indicator of college readiness. Next. We encourage institutions to use the placement protocol that results in the highest level of placement for students. So for institutions that are using multiple measures assessment in the context of the TSI COVID waiver to place students, the protocol should be applicable to students both with TSI, TSIA2 scores, or with non-passing TSIA2 scores. Here we noticed that early on that students with TSIA scores were seemingly being penalized for having taken the test. So a student that actually took the test and perhaps had the same other indicators as a student that the institution were using that didn't take the test, they were not allowed to be placed under the multiple measures assessment policy. So if the student had a non-passing TSIA score, that student was then perhaps placed into developmental education when, if looked at the other measures, they could have been potentially placed in a college level course without required support. So again, these, what I just kind of went through more so pertains to high school complete students. However, I do know that a number of institutions enacted multiple measures assessment policies to place dual credit students, and that's absolutely fine as well. So to the degree that the institution is using MMA in line with their agreement with the high school, it should be equitably and fairly applied. And last, institutions should be tracking these indicators that they're using for placement at the student level. And the last point I'll make about the COVID waiver is this is for the institutions of higher education to develop. Early on, I met with a number of ISDs, and they were in their best effort presenting to me their multiple measures assessment plan for placement. However, unfortunately, the rule applies to, or the temporary rule that's in place, in governance that's provided by the coordinating board, is only for the institutions of higher education. So if you have any questions about that, definitely work with your IHE to find out what options are available. But just to reiterate, effective fall 2022 placements, we will be reverting back to current rule with the exception of that small subset of institutions that we'll be working with to track data. Next slide. And here's what multiple measures assessment looks like for high school complete students beyond summer 2022. Institutions must use the TSI assessment and diagnostic results along with other holistic factors in their consideration of courses and interventions when addressing the educational and training needs of undergrad students not meeting the college readiness standards. So this is already in rule. It's TAC rule 4.57. So institutions of higher education, we're definitely going to be doing a huge push to make sure that not only they're aware of this autonomy, because this makes a big difference in the placement of students. For instance, if a student makes a 944 on the math section of the TSIA2, that student, in some cases, by some institutions, may be considered what we refer to as a bubble student, or you're near, but not far away. So what this looks like in placement is we encourage the use of additional factors. So that score alone is not being used to place the student in, let's just say, a 3-hour co-requisite model course, when in fact, they have a strong high school GPA, or they have a strong math high school course taking pattern, or algebra 2 average, things like that, that could be used in tandem with the diagnostic results of the TSIA to place the student, let's just say, in a co-requisite course where it only has a 1-hour non-course based option attached to it. So in essence, that students would be engaging in 4 hours of math that semester, juxtaposed of 6. Next slide. Next slide. And here I'll dive into the TSIA2, which I know you've been waiting for. A refresher for some, maybe new information for others, but it launched on January 11th, 2021. It was 3 years in the making. And yes, we did launch in the middle of a pandemic, and that was with 2 delays with the launch date. The major enhancements includes integration of reading and writing tests into one test, the English language arts and reading. So there are no longer 3 sections to the TSIA2, there are 2, and it's mathematics and English language arts and reading. We've reduced the diagnostic test to 1 per subject area. We have a second chance pass opportunity for math through the diagnostic test. And this is very, very important. It previously existed with the writing section on the former assessment, and it still exists with the ELAR section, that there's, when the student routes into the diagnostic, there's still a way for a student to reach the benchmark of college readiness. But for math, this is new. And I'll share with you those scores a little later. A student may send scores directly to institutions at time of testing through a student portal, with the caveat that we still encourage you, high school counselors, to encourage the students to contact the institution to understand how they want the scores to be received. This is a feature of the system, but not all institutions of higher education actually utilize it. So just be sure that although it's available, that students really understand what their institution requires of them to receive their scores. Free access to TSIA2 learning resources, online library of instructional and practice materials. And I'll go into a little bit of detail about that a little later in the presentation as well. And also, based on the students' diagnostic test results, they can be provided with customized access to the TSIA2 learning resources library. Next slide. And I noticed in the chat, there were a couple of things that came in regarding accommodations. So here are the accommodations that are automatically provided with the test. 1, it's untimed. 2, it has a built-in save and continue feature. However, it's not available for the essay, but for the college readiness classification test, as well as the diagnostic test, those multiple choice components, it is available. And with that save and continue later feature, the student can save and stop the test, save and continue later, and they have up to 13 days to come back and complete that test. The pop-up on-screen calculators for functions, square root or graphing, available during the math test as applicable. And just a reminder, we highlight this because an often question that we receive from K-12 is, well, our students have a accommodation where they can use a handheld calculator on the state test. However, since this is a test for in the space of higher education, physical handheld calculators are not permitted for the use with the TSIA2, given the design of the test. It's computer adaptive, and each math question is predetermined to which type, if any, of a calculator will be available to the student. It's just really imperative that you follow these guidelines to make sure that the actual constructs for the math questions that are being tested are doing so properly. And last but not least, there's a highlighted feature available for all multiple choice portions of the test. And even on the essay, the student can highlight within the prompt. So the highlighted feature is really important if the student wants to highlight something to just jog their memory or things like that. And I'll talk a little bit about how to access tutorials on both the calculator feature and the highlighter feature later on as well. Next slide. So for K-12, if you would like to consider any accommodations beyond those that I've already explained in the previous slide, contact your local IHE, particularly who you're partnering with for dual credit, to appropriately determine the accommodations that are going to work. In not all cases will the students' accommodations that they receive that are approved by K-12 be applicable to the TSI. And additional guidance can be found in a document, in the accommodations document that we have on our webpage, and the link will be there for you as well. Next slide. As a recap, here are the benchmarks for the TSIA2. For mathematics, pretty straightforward. CRC greater than or equal to 950, or the second chance opportunity I alluded to that's new. The CRC is less than 950 and a diagnostic level of 6. And yes, the diagnostic level range is 1 through 6, and we did not arbitrarily pick the diagnostic level of 6. So when you look at this, imagine that you're looking at the 950 and a 950 and then the 6 on a number line going parallel, where the 950 and the 6 are aligned. It's psychometrically aligned. So the diagnostic test is calibrated to the college readiness classification test in a manner to where literally psychometrically the diagnostic level 6, if a student achieves that score, it's the same as the student meeting a 950 on the CRC. And for English language arts and reading, gets a little bit more complicated, but hey, we can deal with it. The college readiness classification score greater than or equal to 945 and an essay score greater than or equal to 5. So it's conjunctive. They must have both of those. And that second chance pass opportunity for ELAR, if the CRC is less than 945, the diagnostic level must be greater than or equal to 5, and the essay must be greater than or equal to 5. And the last thing I'll highlight here, and I know some of you probably are already wondering this. Well, why is it level 5 if the student gets the essay if they score a diagnostic level 4? Students that score a diagnostic level 4 do show promise, and we didn't want to end the test for them there. So those students will be presented with the essay. However, if the diagnostic level score is 4, in regard to the essay score, that student does not have an option to achieve college readiness. However, next slide. There are standalone retest options for the essay only or ELAR CRC only, available for students who met the benchmark only for one component, the CRC or essay on the TSIA2. So for instance, in the previous scenario that I was just referencing, if that student scored a 4 on the diagnostic and a 5 on the essay, that student is not college ready. However, when they retest, that student would be eligible to retest only on the ELAR CRC. And that's one scenario. And conversely, if the student made a 948 on the ELAR CRC and they made a 4 on the essay, that student would have satisfied the ELAR CRC score benchmark, and that student could retest on the TSIA2 essay only. For students that met only one component of the TSIA writing benchmark prior to January 11th, 2021, we still have a number of these in the mix where all scores for TSIA and TSIA2 are valid 5 years from date of testing. However, additional guidance regarding this can be found on our website under the TSIA2 resources. There's a whole guide with outline scenarios that has proven to be very beneficial and updated with all of the nuances to the best of my ability that you bring to my attention. Next slide. And here, the TSIA and TSIA2 essay scores may be used interchangeably to meet the respective CR college readiness benchmark and retest scenarios. So I'm not going to delve into this in this presentation. However, the guidance document that I referenced on our website outlines a number of scenarios. And if you have any follow-up regarding to the application of this to a particular student's, in determining a student's college readiness status, definitely do not hesitate to reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to assist you. Next slide. And here's some preliminary outcomes regarding the TSIA2. So thus far through August 2021, we've had approximately 288,000 administrations in ELAR and 300,000 in math. The outcomes mostly align with the former assessment where approximately 20% of students are testing college ready on ELAR, and for math, 22%. And respectively with ELAR, we're noticing that when it comes to the essay, that particularly in the higher education test takers, those are in a high school complete, their essay scores are clustering more in the 4 or 5 range. And for our high school test takers, the essay scores are clustering more in the 3-4 range. So we're acknowledging that the essay outcomes juxtaposing comparison to the former assessment are indicating that or suggesting learning loss, particularly among high school test takers with the dip in those scores. Go back for me real quick. And then last but not least, we continue to monitor closely the outcomes with the College Board, and we're slated for the validity study. So there was a question in the chat regarding, well, it doesn't seem like a lot of students are passing. Are you going to change the scores? The scores will not be revisited. The benchmarks will not be revisited until the completion of the validity study, which we contemplated delaying due to COVID. However, we understand that now where we are is where we are in terms of addressing the learning loss and knowledge gaps, that's going to be in years to come. So we've opted not to delay the validity study. It will start in January of 2022, and we anticipate it to conclude in the summer of 2022. So once the validity study is completed, that's when we'll reassess whether any adjustments to the benchmarks are needed. Next slide.
Kelan, just really quickly, I'd like to pause. Someone had raised their hand several times. You may or may not be able to unmute yourself, but Luciana, if you had a question and you want to type it in the chat box real quick, we can address it. I know you had your hand up several times. Okay, I don't see it, but if you want to add something in the chat box or the Q&A box, we can address it. Go ahead, Kelan. I just wanted to.
No problem. And if she chimes in with her question, definitely chime in and I'll address it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. And the just some updates on the TSIA2 itself regarding adult education. The TSIA, its former version scores are approved for ability to benefit. And we're currently in the process with our test vendor of submitting the TSIA2 for ability to benefit. And the College Board has submitted the TSIA2 for use with federally funded AEL programs. And this is all in an effort to prevent those going through adult education to have to take 2 tests. So currently, there are approved tests through 4 AEL programs that they can use as indicators for placement. However, the state's college readiness test is not approved. So we're working through that process to get that taken care of. And through special provision that is made available to TWC, their AEL department is working on revising policy to include alternative assessment options, such as the TSIA2 to inform placement to help, again, eliminate the need for double testing students, particularly those in adult education. Next. Next. And I'm going to run through these slides so I can definitely yield the floor to my colleague, Michelle. But definitely, if there's anything regarding this information, please do not hesitate to follow up with me. The student portal is the one-stop shop, TSIA2.accuraplacer.org. If you've not visited, I strongly suggest that you do so. And in there was a question earlier, where can out-of-state students take the TSIA2? There's test center locators. So whereas they can find any test taking center, not only in the state, they'll find those that offer remote testing for AccuraPlacer-based platforms as well. But specifically regarding testing, students coming into Texas that are out of state seeking to test, the best advice I can give them is to coordinate with their institution of higher education to develop that plan for remote testing. And normally the institutions, the testing centers are very skilled in that, as that's something that they do quite often. The student portal also contains practice resources. So you can get the latest and greatest, the test question packets, the sample test questions, sample essays, access to the TSIA2 study app, and also the practice resources, which I alluded to earlier, which includes the additional resources on test taking tutorials, inclusive of the calculator tutorial, as well as the highlighter tutorial. And those are really important because the calculator feature can be a little complex for students at times. However, give them that opportunity to engage with it prior to taking the test. Before they start the math section, they give a quick tutorial on the calculator. However, I know it's highly beneficial to a student to have access to that prior to even engaging with the assessment. And last but not least, through the student portal, I alluded that at time of testing, students have the ability to send their scores to institutions. However, through the student portal, students can go back in and send their scores to additional institutions, up to 3 at a time, an unlimited number of institutions free of charge. And just in advance, regarding the score share feature, K-12, if your student is not in a direct pipeline for an institution, please be mindful of students using that feature, just so if they're if you already have a process with your IHE to where you test the students under your account and you actually transmit the scores to your institution, please just be mindful that institutions have to engage with every record that they receive. So if it's not a student that's coming into their pipeline, it could just get overwhelming with thousands of students that aren't in that immediate pipeline sending those scores. So while it's available, please utilize it with caution. Next slide. And here are the steps for students to receive and share their TSIA2 scores. So in the student portal, the student has to enter the required data, and it's the student ID and their primary or supplemental ID. And regarding the ID fields, I occasionally do checks with the TSIA data regarding the ID fields. Please make sure that you're using the ID fields in line with the guidance that we've provided to you. If you're not familiar with that guidance, at the end of my slides, there's a resource slide, and on our webpage for TSI and DE at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, there's an ID guidance document, and it provides with you exactly how it should be listed. And this is in line with, in partnership with TEA, that we developed this guidance to best be able to match. And there was a question earlier regarding funding, and with House Bill 3, the outcomes, the bonus funding and the TSI being one of those tests, it's imperative that you do the best you can to make sure that those IDs are utilized, those ID fields are utilized correct, so TEA can do a proper match to make sure that you're eligible for any bonus funding that you may be eligible to receive. And then last but not least, the student, once they enter their information, it'll come up and they can select the institutions that they would like to send it to. Next slide. Next. And then here, this is more so for the IHEs. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but there are additional steps that you must take. So when we launched this feature, we grandfathered everybody into it. However, there's 2 additional steps that institutions must take to actually utilize this feature. So that's where I was saying, although an institution's name might appear in that drop-down box, if they've not taken those additional steps to accept scores through the score share feature, it's essentially like the student sending their scores into a black hole. It'll never reach them. So in essence, we're working with our institutions to improve the utilization of this feature. However, in K-12, we strongly encourage you to have the student reach out to the institution to best understand how institutions want to receive those scores. Next slide. For site managers, this is really important in the K-12 space as well. So if a student jumbles their email address, or let's just say you put in their school email address, which perhaps we don't recommend, because that actual email address, once they graduate, they no longer have access to it, and it creates issues with them being able to access their records. So to the extent possible, we encourage you to use a student's personal email address, but if that email address is incorrect, the steps are here for you to correct that email address. Next slide. Next slide. For some of you, you probably already aware of this, but the user role management, they've combined the way that you can interact with your profiles for certain levels. So if you're a site manager at multiple campuses, you no longer have to log out and log back in to get to your new campus. You can click in the top right where it says your name and your role, click down, and then where it's highlighted, switch role site, and you can do so there. So hopefully this was a very useful upgrade, and we've definitely heard you, and we're doing our best to respond to you with regard to making the platform more user-friendly. Next slide. Report scheduler, I get this question a lot. How can we get access to our data? How can we get access to our data? Customized reports are a strong feature, and if they're already pre-set up, they're already predetermined reports that you can set in the report schedule as well. So under reports, it walks you through here, report scheduler. You can set it up weekly, monthly. And if you are a large district and you're trying to batch data, you probably get as frustrated as I do when I'm pulling data that it goes through this 20-minute process only to tell you that the file was too big. So this is a way to break it down in nuggets automatically. So whether you need it now or you don't, you have the report available to you when you do. Next slide. And here's some gentle reminders. And this has been a thorn in our side, everyone's side, across the pandemic, particularly where students are using computers other than the school districts to test. The verify system check is to ensure optimum testing experience for students. So for students that are testing on their own computers, if you're still doing any type of remote testing, have them check this prior to test day. And that feature can be found on the TSIA2.accommodations.org website as well. And also for your school computers that students may be testing on, we often get comments and questions regarding the display of math questions. And this is usually when we run this tool or walk them through running this tool, it throws an error about the way that fonts are set up or a particular setting. And just make sure that you're utilizing this feature to make sure that the computer students are testing on is compatible with the AccuPlacer platform. And again, particularly for our institutions of higher education, opt in to receive student shared scores. Next score. I'm sorry, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Just keep cooking. So essentially, the TSIA2 learning resources, online library of instructional and practice materials, you can engage with it in a variety of ways. Students can engage with it as pre-testing, And when you go in there, it can be overwhelming. I'm gonna be quite honest. And it's a number of resources. However, it's only really useful to the student if they've already have some type of identified skill gaps and they're looking for more so specific materials on content areas. However, on the back end, if a student does not meet the college readiness benchmark, they're provided with the learning locator code. And then using that learning locator code, the student is provided with a customized set of resources in the TSIA2 Learning Resources Library. And here's some ways that the TSIA2 Learning Resources Library can be used. And then we also encourage you to think about the next operational steps in your operation in terms of considering giving teachers, faculty, reporter access to TSIA2 scores so they can have access to those diagnostic results, and consider how to share student results, the score roster, diagnostic roster, the placement test, placement roster. And this is really, really important because this information, I always like to contextualize it like the reports that we get done at the state level. We don't want this just to end up on a bookshelf. Utilize those diagnostic test scores for their full benefit to really help students address those skill gaps in preparing for their retest. Or if you're in a college prep course and you already know those identified skill gaps, you can pull resources directly from the learning library to address those gaps as well. Next slide. And here's the support resources. And on the next slide, it'll give you our access to our TSIDE listserv and then our contact information. And that concludes my presentation and the kitchen sink.
Thank you so much, Kelan. Yes, we've had a couple of questions on whether or not we will send this presentation, and we will absolutely send you the slides so you have access to the links. And I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Snyder from Crockett High School.
Just real quick, I was going to share. I'll be scrolling through the chat, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that were posed to the individuals that sent them while Michelle is presenting.
Perfect. Thank you, Kelan. We appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. You can go to the next slide, Laura. I just wanted to briefly kind of share some information about how the TSI works on our campus, just for a bit of a picture so that you can try and picture how you might do this on your campus. By no means do we have a perfect system, but we do have a system that's working pretty well for our students. Just to give you some context, Crockett is an urban public high school with about 1,600 students. We're also an early college high school, so we have about 300 students in our early college high school program. About 80% of our students are graduating partially or fully college ready. We're almost exactly at state standards, state averages. So 57% of our students are graduating college ready in both math and reading. But most of our students are meeting those readiness standards through TSI, not through SAT or ACT exemptions. So we are proctoring a lot of TSI exams on our campus. This data is an average of 2018 and 2019, just for your reference, but we're still proctoring so many exams on our campus. So we've developed some good systems that work for getting our students tested and prepared. So you can go to the next slide. So for us, organizing TSI testing includes multiple different opportunities. So we always have monthly optional testing opportunities for students where students can opt in to test. So we literally have a paper and pencil sign-up sheet in our college and career center where students who are trying to pass, who are working on it, who actively want to be taking the test can sign up and opt in. And so for us, that's the first Friday of every month, we have testing opportunities for students. But we also have large scale testing opportunities where students who haven't passed are required to test. So for example, that looks like seniors testing the TSI while our 9th through 11th graders are taking the PSAT on PSAT day. We'll also have required testing for seniors who haven't passed when our juniors are taking the school day SAT or when our underclassmen are taking EOC exams. So they have multiple opportunities to pass. And while they do have optional testing opportunities every month, we do have required testing for students who still haven't passed. Also, we're working to get our sophomores and juniors tested in early spring semesters through in-class testing. So they will take the ELA portion of the TSI through their English classes and the math portion through their math classes. So they have multiple opportunities to take this exam. And we also have optional testing for students in the summer who are onboarding to become our early college high school students, but also seniors who are trying to get that last minute TSI completion before they enroll in college. Next. We've got some good best practices that I just wanted to share with you all. So for those students who are not motivated by the opportunity to enroll in college level courses, seniors are not allowed to have an off period or a study hall period unless they've passed the TSI. So that seems to be quite the motivator for students. They really want that off period option. So they work really hard to get their TSI complete. We have some college prep ELA and math courses on our campus that are a TSI equivalent with our local community college as well. So students who are struggling to pass the TSI, if they pass the exam at the end of that course, which is designed to prepare them for TSI material, our local community college accepts that course credit in place of their TSI. We also offer a TSI tutoring elective course for students. That's a small group study, about 8 to 10 students per class period that students can opt into for the semester or the year and get in-depth prep for passing the TSI. And then our district and campus is really awesome at using the reporting features through the AccuPlacer portal and getting those student scores directly into our district information systems. So that way teachers don't have to have separate reporting logins for the AccuPlacer portal. They can log into our district systems and see student scores. So when they're talking to a student and advising them about course selection or needing to test, like all of our counselors have access to that information on our campus. So we do not do things perfectly by any means. So there's still areas that we are working to improve as well. So we're really working to recalibrate our testing schedule due to COVID. Pre-COVID, the majority of our students were college ready prior to their senior year. And COVID really delayed that for us with the limited access to testing. We were mostly virtual since March 2020. So we've really been working to reboot that schedule and kind of get back on track. We're also working to improve our structure for remediation and support. We do have a lot of opportunities like built into the school day for students, but students who test and don't pass and want to test again the next month, but don't have space in their schedule to take a full class. We don't have any opportunities for them or tutoring, like structured tutoring opportunities other than giving them access to the Pearson TSIA2 resources. We also had a lot of staff turnover, so we're working on training new proctors, and we need to get a lot of our teachers through the Texas OnCourse TSIA2 module, just so that they have this new information, and figuring out how to get that information across campus so that if I'm out sick, for example, like things can still happen with the TSI, like how can we spread the wealth of knowledge to more people on our campus to get our students supported. We're working to improve our communication regarding testing requirements with our parents, students, and staff. We always share the study resources through emails that we send to our families, but I think with all of the requirements for graduation, sometimes testing is really confusing for parents. So we're really working on that. And then we're hoping to simplify student access to scores. Right now, we don't have student access to TSI scores in any of our school systems. They have to come to me or to a teacher to find out what their score is if they can't remember, unless they get into that TSI student portal, which we haven't done a very good job of pushing out to students. So we're really working on our process to get that information to students so that they have those resources at their fingertips and they can be responsible for sending their scores to institutions. And so it's not just us. So still lots to do. Thanks so much to Kelan for sharing all of the updates and information. I know we'll be using that on our campus this year as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michelle. I know we are at time, and one of the things that we are doing on our side is keeping track of questions. We may not have been able to answer all of the questions here, but I saw, Kelan, you were able to answer some. I've seen some questions about Edgenuity as well. So we will, and just, prep, and as well as course remediation and things like that. Is there anything else you wanted to address, Kelan, before we close out?
Just one specific question that I was actually just trying to type a response to, and it was regarding the calculator accommodation. With the guidance that I gave, would it supersede the written accommodation plan for handheld calculator? And the answer is yes. So due to the nature of the test, and since it is a higher education test, the accommodations rules are different in terms of determining appropriate accommodation. So in fact, it would supersede it, the guidance that I provided, that handheld calculators are not allowed. However, if in tandem with the institution of higher education, if that was determined, it could stand, but it couldn't stand just based on their accommodation on the K-12 side.
Great. Thank you, Kelan. All right, without further ado, we're going to close out here. We will send the slides and the information. Don't forget to, we'll give you the link, and that will be posted on YouTube so you can see the recording. And thank you all so much. We will send and keep track of your questions and add any documents and additional information on this topic, the TSIA2. Thank you all so much.